Thank you for staying with us on this holiday installment of the AM show. Now from, what we've been talking about, chats and feeding in our schools, very interesting conversation. Let's get on to talk about public sector workers and the Public Services Workers Union of the TUC, with a total of, note, over 27,000 workers threatening government, so to speak, on the back of a reluctance to heed the call for a cost of living allowance, which is going to further deepen the woes of government, as 4 teacher unions already have laid down their tools. Now, as stakeholders move into negotiation mode, how are things likely to unfold in the midst of an IMF bailout as far as our economy is concerned? What are the implications on governance and the economy? We're going to have an interaction this morning with the Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union, John Sampah. He joins me in the studio. We have labor expert Austin Game. We also have Dr. Osei Kwapong, a CDD fellow. Join us with your thoughts. But do note, let me just add this. After we're done, the question we've posed on social media this morning, you can, catch up and share your reaction. What does the food shortage in our senior high schools mean for the survival of free SHS? You get to have your say on that when we return after this conversation. But let's stay on this conversation now. And once more, Mr. Sampah, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to our cherished listeners.
Okay. The good morning. Now, is it because of the situation? Is it because of the cola that hasn't come? Let me start from the standpoint of what Kudumayeding, as you've just mentioned, it means to you, particularly, and maybe to your members from what you've heard so far.
Okay, so we know that workers, we negotiated salary 1 year, but we negotiated 2 year salary, which was quite problematic to our members because they wanted us to wait to see what will happen in this year before we could have. But because of the current arrangement in negotiation, you need to negotiate ahead of the year so that it can be factored in the budget as well. But you know that after the negotiations, a lot of things have changed. And now inflation is so high. I mean, almost every week there is increase in fuel, and everything has also increased. And so the worker's salary is the only one that is not increased. We are not able to rent. We are not able to, some people have even parked their cars, and taxi drivers have increased, spare parts have increased, everything has increased. So when the workers say that all that it means is that whatever we have negotiated and whatever otherwise was able to take us to work income is no longer able to do so. And that is what we mean,
Let me also check in on labor expert Austin Game. Mr. Game, are you with us? Right, I see you now. A very good morning to you, Mr. Game. A very good morning to Dr. Osei Kwapong as well, CDD fellow. Good.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right. I do not think I get your audio feed, Mr. Game. If you could just unmute for me.
I have.
All right. Thank you.
I have. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So you've heard a bit of what Mr. Sampah has been saying in terms of the cost of living and how things are panning out. Mr. Sampah, so from an individual level, you've painted a picture for us. What has this meant for you since the last time there was any sort of increment in your living standards as members of the Public Services Workers Union? So the last time we had an increment of public sector wages, it was 7%. Before that, we had a 4% increment. And I mean, there are people like Professor Steve Hank who say that as of now, our inflationary rate could be hovering around something close to 50%, 48, 49%. In fact, some months back, and this is months ago, about 3 months ago, I engaged Professor Lord Mensah of the University of Ghana Business School, who painted the picture that for him personally, at the time, inflation, when the government statistician was saying it was hovering around 17 plus, 19 plus, 21% thereabouts. He was seeing it at 60%. What is your reading in that regard before I move on to?
Okay, so we have realized that whatever official figures that the government, not only this government, but successive government have issued out, whatever the projected inflationary rate is by Bank of Ghana, labor and those of us that really go to the market, it doesn't really gel. You don't.
It's not reflective.
It's not reflective, and so I also believe that the kind of inflation that is projected on record, sometimes when you go to the market, I mean, we all know how much we were buying cement, let's say a year ago, and currently how much we are buying it, how much we used to buy fuel, how much we buy now, how much we buy certain spare parts. Almost everything has doubled or is almost to the level of double. So sometimes you wonder what kind of formula is used to arrive at those kind of inflation.
As far as I know, the government, the Ghana Statistical Service has a basket of over 200 or so items that they use to, gauge the inflationary rate. But even if we're to stick by what they are making mention of, these are some of the highest we've seen in about 2 decades. So even that rate is quite on the high.
That is true. That is true. And that is why you could see that almost everybody is feeling the heat in the country. Workers are feeling the heat. Not only workers, but taxi drivers are not actually making money because people are not actually dropping anymore. And the general condition is that people are really suffering. And as workers, obviously, the only person we can go to is our employer, and to have a dialogue and to see what can be done. Also because
in terms of what can be done, let me just hold you there briefly, because look, we all know the times are hard, but you're not the only one feeling the pinch. I'm feeling the pinch. You are feeling the pinch. And guess what? Those in officialdom, authority, the same government you're going to, they are also feeling the pinch. And they are saying, look, our discretionary spending and others, we've cut them by 30%. You heard Mr. President during the Eid celebrations. We've cut them by 70%, 30%, I beg your pardon. When it comes to fuel that is dispensed to government officials and the rest, we've cut them by 50% and all of that. We're all tightening our belts. So to speak, why are you crying wolf?
Okay, so when the 4% and 7% was announced, almost the same meant it came up about the Article 71 office holders, their condition of service having been improved. I have some information, and so I know that it was not really improved on that year, but usually it is over the years that it increased.
Yes,
but it was announced.
Sometimes there is what we call back pay.
That is it. That is it.
Over time, then there is an incremental value.
Okay,
they are paid.
So you see what happened at that same time. Their increase came, and it was so high. And if you already taken so much, and already you have received so much increase, then obviously even if you cut 30%, you are still ahead. It means nothing. Really survive. Now, most of these people, their conditions are well taken care of. They have accommodation, they have everything. So sometimes somebody will say that even the salary that is paid that person, what does he really use it for? Because everything that you use your money for on the market is also provided some way, somehow for the person. So such a person, you cannot really use that one to gauge.
Is that a hypocritical stance then, to suggest that we should all tighten our belts because of the yawning differences?
Yes, I think so.
And feel it is hypocritical.
If we really want to tighten our belt, let us have a national dialogue. Let us have other strategies by which we can tighten our belt. Let us actually restructure how things are, because some of the systems, it has been there, it is man-made, and it has been there for many years. And if we are in hard times, I believe that when we sit down and we want to restructure how things are done in this country, we will be able to get somewhere. We'll be able to make some surpluses that we'll be able to use to pay even cost of living allowance and still be able to use it to do other things.
Mr. Sampah, before I get on to the other guests, and I just wanted to give you enough time to expatiate properly. So if you had the opportunity of suggesting that Article 71 office holders, or at least those at the helm of affairs, mainly the executive branch and some heads of CEOs and all of that, should take a further pay cut Do you think it would be a step in the right direction?
Well, these people, we talk always about Article 71 officeholder, but from what I know, they don't constitute too large
A number.
percentage, the number. So,
But the draw, actually.
Yeah,
So,
so-
the issue is they are a small number, but the draw on the public purse is huge. That is the difference.
Okay.
And there are many more public sector workers, but the draw, if you had to weigh, maybe 3% versus 97%, yet what the 3% may be getting and what the 97% are getting, that's how.
Okay, so
it
on the
is looked
personal
at.
level, I think that there are a number of things to be done. Now, there are a number of things apart from pay cut.
Right.
There are a lot of loopholes also in the system. Now, the pay that you see executives get is not the only things that they get. But in the office, you know that the system is such that people are able to maneuver, to do so many things also in the public space. And I think that if we really want to save this economy, apart from pay cuts, we also have to actually check corruption and the loopholes in the system. We also have to check how people are benefiting from contract awards and all those kind of things. Chief executive in our companies, also the government itself, its size, its lifestyle, and how it does everything, and not this government alone,
Right.
but successive government. If we are able to sit to have a conversation to restructure everything, perhaps the ordinary worker who is feeling the pinch will understand, because he has been part of the system. But the system that we have today is really unfair. So when people are talking, it's accumulation of many things that the people, the workers are talking about.
Okay.
And not only because they think that their salary is too small.
All right, do hold for me. I'll come back to you. But let me bring in labor expert Austin Game, who also joins the conversation. Mr. Game, the last time we interacted, you were bereaved. I'm hoping that God, bit by bit, is comforting you together with your family. Thank you once more for making the time to be with us. But let's talk labor issues. We're back at the same point. You know, we've had a number of conversations, and every time we come back to the same point. Threats of this or that, you know, industrial actions here and there, especially because of the cost of living. We're back to square one. And the question is, any surprises in here that we have the teachers' unions? They have had, in fact, tomorrow there are going to be further interactions. The National Labour Commission has had to step in. But now we have the Public Services Workers Union, who are also saying, pay us COLA, else things will not go well. And we're talking 27,000 people. Any surprises in there?
Thank you. I appreciate your earlier comment. To be very honest with you, we've gotten to a junction that we have to be very careful as a people and as a nation. The past, anything good in the past, let's bring it up here now. Anything that is of no help, let's leave it there. In the past, when we had a similar situation, but not this gargantuan level of inflation and related matters, the employer, government then, quickly organized a national and comprehensive national dialogue at home, and almost all the unions were present, and other players were all present. I was there myself. We had a very open-ended type of conversation based on our labor law, because the law enjoins the employer to have an open dialogue with his own workers when you have matters of this nature. To the extent that it also opens that if you have a situation like this, go carry the economic situation and the welfare of the people under section, I believe, 113 subsection C. The importance of it should be openly discussed, and you arrive at a decision that will satisfy both of you. This is a lot more heavier a burden than that of 2015. Yet that was what they did. So it's getting a little too late, but I'm happy they're opening up for a dialogue maybe on Tuesday, just tomorrow. I wonder the format, But now that the Labour Commission has been maybe put in place, they may offer some help, because I know my friends who are there have the level of capacity to be able to guide the conversation. If they can do that well, fine. Otherwise, we are heading for some trouble.
You say we're heading for some trouble, and it's interesting because in one breath you say it's a little too late, and in another breath you say we're heading for trouble. That cannot bode well. How exactly do you mean? Because look, like it or not, Mr. Game, I'm sure you're familiar with our labor situation in the country, and every now and then there will be issues. It's also dependent on government and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, how the National Labor Commission engages, unions and all of that. But these will happen from time to time. So when you put these two together, I get worried. What do you mean?
If you have a twine and it's intertwined so badly in a manner that you have to unwind it, it takes a lot of dexterity and skill to be able to unwind it. At the moment, we have the twine really in shambles, and unwinding it requires this kind of expert skills to do it. So it's not a question of the employer government alone. It's not even a case of Labour Commission alone. That's why perhaps you are doing what you are doing now. If we can be open and honest and have this conversation, which defines the quality of the relationship between the parties. And we all know that the kind of relationship that exists today is not the best. So, too late because proactivity as enshrined in the Labour Act has not been taken into consideration. We are supposed to be proactive in managing labor relation matters.
Is that to suggest we've been reactive thus far?
Precisely. We have to prevent the reactivity going forward. Never should it occur again. To whoever comes to head this country tomorrow, they should be aware that proactivity has not been placed in the Labour Act to occupy space. It's intended to be used and used properly.
But Mr. Game, sorry to keep interjecting or intervening. You say whoever takes over power tomorrow, but we have leadership now, so I guess we should start solving the problem from now.
Yeah, so I'm warning ahead that today we have government in place. They have just invited our colleagues to be at the table. I'll plead with my colleagues that they should take it easy because this is our country. I concede that it will be a very tough business for government even if they give 1%, it will lead us to another inflationary bracket. If they give 2%, it will lead us to another inflationary bracket, let alone 20%. So what else could they do? What is it that if they don't do will be risky for us? What is it that if they do will be risky? They should open up for the conversation, not argument and debate, because somebody will lose the debate, somebody will win the debate. We don't need argument now. All we need is a simple, civilized conversation around the table for a consensus to be reached. At the end of the day, everybody would have been happy for participating in the conversation. Otherwise, maybe some strange thing will happen.
Let me just sneak in this bit, and it's the starting question I'll throw to Dr. Osai Kwapon. But Doc, just hold for me. Mr. Game, I wanted to run this by you because of the tail end of the submission you just made. At the Eid al-Adha celebrations, the president said, and I quote, the current economic challenges are on a global scale. So I'm paraphrasing, actually. The current economic challenges are on a global scale, which have affected many countries. But I'm giving the assurance that government is leaving no stone unturned in terms of resolving these challenges. When you weigh the global economic crises that we have to deal with, COVID-19 on one hand, the Russo-Ukrainian endeavor on the other, can anything really be done about the situation? I mean, you can call for it, but the reality is, can government meet it at all?
If I were to be chairing this meeting, a lot of techniques will have to be deployed. In reality, a 20% or even 10% COLA given to the workers would mean some 2 years problem.
2 years problem. Wow.
Yes, because it will carry us into other inflationary rate. Look, 1% to the public sector is a major concern. So let alone 10, 15, or 20. Whichever way it is, it will be a problem. But is there anything else that could be done? Yes, I think so. We have taxes. We have tax thresholds. The PAYE can be adjusted. We will not borrow money to pay that. As for COLA, you have to borrow money to pay. And you have to pay interest on whatever you borrow. The consequences are there. But the PAYE, or if we remove some of the taxes that are becoming problematic for us and put money directly into the pocket of each and everyone, indeed, even the private sector people, including my workers that I have, I can guarantee you they are all going to the same market with the public sector workers. So everybody needs some cushioning. And so if the tax threshold can be lifted, we should suffer some 3, 4, 5 maximum percent, it will not borrow money to do that. And we may suffer a hitch a little bit. But if it's COLA, I have negotiated COLA before when I was a union leader.
Right.
And we were giving that COLA. The consequences at the time is different from the consequences today. And so we have to go gingerly and put all the alternatives on the table. Let them have a conversation around it.
Okay.
And because we have given tax threshold, we have lifted the tax threshold before and giving workers that aspect of it instead of giving money directly by borrowing it and paying. It is problematic, to be very honest with you. That's why I said the twine have been really mangled. And to unwind it calls for some dexterity and skill to be able to do that.
Do you feel the system, do you feel the system, just give me a yes or no answer, do you feel the system has the dexterity required to unravel this twine?
Not in its entirety, but we are many. If many people can be invited into the same room under lock and key for some 2-3 hours, we should be able to do it.
Okay. All right.
We shouldn't limit it to just some 10 people.
Let me bring in Dr. Osai Kwapong, and thank you so much for your patience. I just wanted to lay the basis for the conversation from there. But on the back of what Mr. President said at the Eid celebrations, we're in dire economic times. And when you look at the impact this could have on governance generally, the economy in a bit of turmoil, we're going to the IMF. That is, if they even admit us. What does this mean for governance generally?
Well, it goes to show you that certain problems sometimes persist much longer than we think. Some problems sometimes become a little more intractable than we imagine. Like Mr. Austin Gami said, that whatever is resolved today may be a short-term resolution, but there are also other long-term issues that should a different government be in place, give it another 2-3 years, you may have some of these issues crop up again. So for me, then the key governance challenge is how do you resolve some of these things with a certain permanency, so that at least you know that within another 5 years you can calm some of these storms around labor agitation. On the other hand, though, there are things that you never also anticipate, right? Situations happen that you may have no control over. Unexpected things may happen. And when those things happen, it sort of jolts you where you have to reposition yourself to deal with some of these issues. And in this particular case, labor agitations, which tend to come up every so often. And most of the time, it really boils down to our public sectors and a wage that allows them, to live comfortably, quote unquote, even in dire times, right? That what measures do you put in place to insulate your public sector workers should something in the economy jolt them in such a way that they also begin to face economic hardships and economic challenges, just like everyone else. Again, like Mr. Austin said, his private sector workers go to the same market as the public sector workers. And so what sort of purchasing power are these two types of workers going to the market with? And that becomes the governance challenge that some way, somehow, like he said, if you can have an open, transparent dialogue about it, acknowledge the realities, acknowledge the challenges, and then some way, somehow find some workable compromise. Because I mean, given the times in which we are, I can see a sort of adversarial, atmosphere, clouding this conversation and this engagement. But it is also not the time for that sort of adversarial, creation of an adversarial atmosphere because of the circumstances surrounding the demands and, the ability or inability of government to resolve some of these things. But that really is the intractable governance challenge that we face, that we have to find a way to deal with it.
There's this message that comes through from Papania J, who says, cancel the ex gratia and spread the differences to all government workers, not only to the politicians. You say the so-called Article 71. I can't add the word you use, but that's the suggestion there. And I was just sharing with Mr. Sampah that when you look at the quantum of what we give our Article 71 holders, so just a few, but so much compared to even the large masses of public sector workers. And now, in addition to the teachers, we have the Public Services Workers Union. So this is a thought that is shared. There's also Mr. Sampah himself, who has said, as you can read on your screens, that in terms of the cost of living allowance, apart from pay cuts and all of that, we must also stem the tide of corruption. How much of a factor is that, do you see, Dr. Akakpo?
So if you think about this whole issue around Article 71 office holders, right, and if you look at some of the committee reports and you see the disparity between, the changes over time in how much they are giving versus how much the public sector worker earns, you can see the issues of inequity emerging. And so when you put on the table the question of shared sacrifices, I think you have to balance that call for shared sacrifices, right? In the sense that if one side would have to even tighten their belts much further, I think, those making the demands, labor would also have to see that the other side of the equation is also making some real meaningful sacrifices.
Should government officials, Article 71 office holders, be made to tighten their belts further? At the Eid, we're told by Mr. President that they have suffered 30% pay cuts, but people are also asking, what is 30% of what? 40,000 plus? If you halve your fuel coupons or benefits by 50%, that could be the equivalent of a poor school teacher's entire salary for a month. So could they go further?
I believe so, but I think I was very intrigued by one of the suggestions that Mr. Game put on the table, which is, can you do something about the pay as you earn, right? Something that won't put, well, should I say, if you were weighing the two options, going to borrow, paying interest on it to meet some of these demands, versus suffering a little bit of a revenue loss because you either increase the threshold at which pay starts to kick in. I think that is one idea worthy of pursuing. But you're right. In the times in which we are, the sacrifices would have to be deep, right? And not just the sacrifices, the sacrifices on those who are perceived to be the ones really, quote unquote, benefiting from the system. Those perceptions, perception may not be reality, but sometimes perceptions are also reality. And so there has to be those very strong signals that are sent to say that, look, for example, even us as Article 71 holders, we are also making some deep sacrifices. I think in an atmosphere like that, you reduce the angst on the side of labor and the demands that you're making if you say, look, we won't be able to meet your food demands. They have to be able to see on the government side that, okay, we are seeing that you are making some good faith efforts, and therefore we are also willing to temper our agitations and demands a little bit. But if those deep sacrifices are not seen on the side of the policymakers, Article 71 holders, etc., it becomes very difficult to ask others to make those sacrifices. I mean,
in other words,
if they have to be shared, they have to be shared very deeply.
Okay, leadership by example. Let me just have you make this final point before I come to Mr. Sampah in the studio, and then we'll start, winding down on the conversation. I'm sure you followed what has happened, how the cookie has crumbled in Sri Lanka. President Rajapaksa, and it's been a Pasca situation in Sri Lanka, hasn't it? So he had to flee with his tail between his legs. Leaders or people, ordinary people in that country, are calling for the Prime Minister to also exit. In fact, when you look at page 6 of the Ghanaian Times newspaper today, it says protesters will occupy palace until leaders go. We've seen some footage from the BBC showing, Rajapaksa leaving the country. I found it of interest that all the V8s and all of that were still at the presidential palace. And it made for interesting watching. Why am I talking about this? At the tail end of that BBC report, the reporter says, look, this is a lesson for all leaders across the world. We have our fair share of the Sri Lankan situation. Fuel prices, inflation of food products, poor salaries and salaries not coming, and cost of living and all of that. From the governance perspective, what do you see and what should we be doing? I'm not a doomsayer or doomsday or naysayer, but how do we avoid getting there?
We avoid getting there by being very proactive. So, for example, labor has made its demands. Some teachers have laid down their tools, things like that. But I think we avoid some of these things by recognizing the economic challenges that people are facing. And again, we always say that governance is both an art and a science. The science part of governance is being able to discuss in very transparent ways the economic realities that we face, the fiscal realities that government is facing. The art part is how you are able to manage group interests, how you are able to manage group agitations, how you are able to temper that to make them say that we are willing to either sacrifice, to hold off a little bit, to come up with some reasonable compromises. And I think for me, in situations like this, it behoves on government to send those very strong signals that we understand, we are listening, and even if they won't be able to do the 20%, you have to find artistic ways of communicating why you won't be able to, why you won't be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, the things that, I can say the same thing to one person, the reaction will be very different. Someone would say the same thing and the reaction will be very different. But for me, I think a recognition of the times in which we are and the willingness to fully engage and find common solutions is very critical at this stage, because we have a governance system to protect. We have a democratic system to protect. And I think we are at the point where, as I always say, we've made our peace with democracy. But there are things that challenges that peace, like some of these economic challenges. And again, being proactive and being very honest about it is what would get us to a point of, everybody going home, even if you don't get all that you came to the table to demand for, that at least you feel a certain sense of satisfaction and relief, knowing that if things get better, those, the gains will be shared.
Okay. Let me come to Mr. Sampah, who has, been waiting with bated breath. So, Mosadei, Kroma
Yeah.
Kroma the temperature hot, eh?
Yeah, our members are not, it is not that easy, it is very difficult to be a labor leader at this time.
How difficult is it?
It's very difficult because...
Tell me what pinch you're feeling.
At one breath, there are a lot of dimensions to whatever we are going on in the country now. The country is in hard times. There's a hint to go to IMF. Whether the picture that is painted is correct or not, our members do not necessarily believe all these. Also,
when you say your members do not necessarily believe all these, what do you mean?
Okay, so what I mean is that, when you go to the negotiation table, there are a lot of information that are made available to you.
Right.
And whether the information made available by those that manage the country, whether the people believe it.
So the data that is there, I mean, initially you were even questioning some of the figures we see when it comes to inflation, whether it's a true reflection of what we...
That is it.
So those are the problems.
So now, at one point, you are at a meeting with all stakeholders and you want to be reasonable, but at one point, your people sometimes do not see. Because as a country, I believe that where we are heading towards, we need to bring people with the skills, and we need to even change certain priorities that we have as a country. Indeed, just one metric, just one priority change could actually solve the money that we really need from IMF to bail us. But
like what?
Okay. When labor meets, it's very difficult sometimes to talk about some of these things because you don't really want to sound political.
You have the platform, talk about it.
But the truth is that if indeed the country is collapsing, and you and I sitting here can pay, let's say, 1,000 cedis for a term for school fees at the secondary school level, why should it be free?
Right, so we basically need to reprioritize when it comes to some of our flagship programs.
Or maybe we need to modify it a little bit.
And in this case, you are talking about free SHS because now we are even struggling with some of the institutions, like you heard.
And the truth is that we are destroying the institutions also because now even the money to take care of our students are not even there. And so at the end of it, before we realize, people are pushed to go to private secondary school, which is even more expensive. So the point is that we can. Now, why should we spend so much money to put National Cathedral when we could perhaps wait it a little bit? So when workers are seeing all these, and you say that there is no money, then there isn't, it may not be true, but if really the economy is collapsing, we need to change priorities. We need to sit and know that something that we want to do today, maybe we can do it tomorrow. I believe when we meet to look at all these, it is possible for us to get something. And Otengami is a very experienced person. He makes very useful input about the taxes we pay even as workers here and there. And in fact, it is good also because it will even reflect even people, not only the people in the public sector, and that is very good. But what will it lead? It will lead to the same thing. We are looking for money in our pocket or a little bit of cushioning. So depending on the percentage that you will actually cut the taxes, it may mean 20%. And for me, even if we can do something so that it will not be only for public sector workers, but also private sector workers that are contributing to this economy also is cushioning a little bit, why not? But we can't do all the negotiation here. I believe that if government have been quite proactive since May, and we made this demand.
So you agree with Austin Game that government has not been proactive?
Completely. I mean, even when workers kept saying that we needed response, even after that, when the Secretary General wrote on behalf of organized labor about 2 months ago, even for response, we have not even received official response. It is only when workers threaten to go on strike or when the strike action starts, before you will see invitation. Why the Public Services Workers Union? We have 65 public sector institutions, very critical public sector institutions, and we hardly actually declare strike or threaten strike.
I mean, it's been a while since I heard of you coming out.
And
sometimes, so I was a bit surprised.
And sometimes even our members wonder why we don't actually strike. But we use dialogue, we use lobbying, and sometimes we get what we want, or we meet ourselves halfway. But when you see that the entire 65 public sector institutions, including electoral commission,
you are 27,000 strong. Right?
No, 27,000 strong, and 65 different public sector institutions. You can imagine what it actually means is that our people, our members are pushing us that we have to take the action. And we have gotten to a point where if we don't take any action, we destroy ourselves even as a union. So I strongly believe that when we sit and we give attention, on the Friday when we had a meeting, at dawn, when we have given notice and we have brought people from all over the country, at dawn around 3 a.m., then my general secretary informed me that he has received invitation for us to attend organized labor meeting.
You're telling me that invitation came at dawn?
Yes, at dawn. How will you
at 3 a.m.
even your people? So sometimes it looks as if
where did this invitation come from? The National Labor Commission?
It came from the Ministry of Employment
and Labor
also fair wages.
Right.
You know, sometimes how this institution works, and sometimes I don't begrudge them, especially fair wages. Fair wages is not really allowed to operate very well.
Fair Wages and Salaries Commission is not allowed to operate well. How do you mean?
What I mean is that, okay, they need resources to be able to organize themselves. Labor Commission need resources. Go to Labor Commission. Their situation is pathetic. They are even part of the PSW. And you see that the resources are not even there. Sometimes even to organize a meeting at fair wages, even a good conference room that can take even 20 people. Labor unions we have in this country are more than 20. If two people are coming, always they have to go and hire a place to go and do even a meeting. All because the managers of the country do not pay much attention to labor institutions, so that we will put mechanism in place not to get to where we have gotten to now. So I think that we are a little bit late, but it's not too late. I believe that when government comes sincerely and committed and not trying to deceive workers again, before you realize, let us do this, we accept something, and then you will hear that they are now going to use money to do this, going to use money to, then our members will think that we have.
So you feel sometimes it is just circumlocution, if you like, to deceive you.
That is it. But we are getting to a point where the workers are now becoming a little more intelligent, and now we will get to a point that you keep on deceiving the people, and now you get to a place where you will never have your peace, because all the unions, the teacher unions, the civil service, the entire public service, then of course we are bringing
everyone will be on your neck,
and that is very bad. But okay, I think that we have to be sincere with some of these discussions.
All right, so gentlemen, I want us to look at the way forward, and I'm going to be addressing this to all three of you, so we move the conversation forward. Do you know what is interesting from all that you've said? Quite a number of interesting things, but one thing you mentioned that, so the National Labor Commission itself, of course, is part of the Public Services Workers Union, yes. So technically they are also agitating.
Yes, once we give notice and our demands are not met, or there's no consensus, when we declare strike action, the National Labor Commission workers are part of it. Of course, the management, the executive secretary, and the commissioners are not part.
I get
but our workers over there will not even open the doors for them to go to the office.
Wow. What an interesting dynamic to this conversation. So let's wrap the conversation on the way forward. What is the way forward? The Fair Wages and Salaries Commission is meeting organized labor tomorrow. What are your expectations as far as that? Because it's on the same matter of COLA, cost of living allowance.
We are looking forward to see a very serious government team. Sometimes when you go and meet the people that are coming to negotiate with you, you realize that people are not too serious. Well, the labor minister is always there because that is his job. We are dealing with Minister of Finance, and sometimes nobody comes. Or sometimes they send somebody who may not have enough capacity. The truth is that when you meet the team and all they do is that they are appealing, please go home, please call off the strike. They don't come with anything. They come only with appeal. And when it happens like that, of course, and that is why we are not going to withdraw our notice, so that we will satisfy the requirement of 7 days notice. Because we believe that these people will come again empty-handed, and they will come only to say, we are pleading with you, don't.
I mean, Mr. President started with the appeal at the Eid celebrations. He says, look,
No. He should send his
withdraw
team,
your services.
Like the way he's composing a team to meet the IMS, he should compose a very strong team to make labor, and they must come with ideas. Austin Gami make useful suggestions. Dr. Sai also makes very important information. These are just two people that you are talking to. What it means that we have more people that can even contribute. So we have a lot of people that government can consult. Apart from that, when they are coming, we should see that government is seeing this as a crisis, and it has composed competent, strong team that have capacity to make commitment on behalf of government. When you see that, obviously you may give attention to it. But when they come with appeal, I strongly believe that appeal, because they have already appealed to the teacher unions and they have not accepted that.
If I asked you what your confidence level is on a scale of 1 to 10 that these engagements will amount to much, what would you say on a scale of 1 to 10? What is your confidence level?
Well, it's 50-50.
50-50?
5, yeah.
All right. Any top-up words before I move on?
Okay, so what I would say to my members is that we are very committed, we are very reasonable people. We will meet government tomorrow, and we'll be very forthright with the issues. When government comes with something that worth consideration, our members should know that we are in this country together and we must save the country. But if government come with plea saying that we should go home, they should actually be ready, because coming 7 days, which is 19, we will actually embark on unprecedented industrial action in Ghana.
The words of Mr. Sampah, who is Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union. Let me bring in Austin Game and Dr. Osai Kwapong for their final takes. So, Austin, you've been there, done that, and it doesn't look like you said there's a storm brewing. Does it look like this storm will be weathered? And what would you like to see in these deliberations that start from tomorrow? Hello, Mr. Game?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Right, thank you. I think that, to be honest with you, the workers hold a simple belief that they do not trust the employer. And where there is no trust, they will operate in the red zone, where they will either be on strike or walk away from meetings or refuse to talk. 3 things, one of them will happen no matter what. And it's very important at this point in time that they all go to the meeting with an open mind. And the employer is enjoined by our Labor Act that under Section 9, to have an open conversation with the workers who are their own employees. To enable them to come to a consensus, they have to brainstorm on all alternatives at the table, generate various options, because otherwise the employer will take a position, the union will take a position, they will drag the nation into the oblivion. To prevent that, when they have the brainstorming session, that's why the meeting, and I have a lot of respect and confidence in my friend and brother Ignatius Bafo, who is the Minister for Employment and Labor Relations. He needs support from the Ministry of Finance. I concede that they have meetings with the IMF, but I guarantee you, at this point in time, even this matter is more important than going to have a meeting with the IMF. Because at the back of it, you can't resolve anything. And the consequences will be dire for all of us than if they send a strong team of either the minister himself, and they must go, everybody must go with humility. No need for any ego to operate there. No need for pride. It's about Ghana and Ghana alone, so that they can have an open-ended conversation, generate all the options, and satisfy themselves that we will get nothing, but we are satisfied and we'll be able to explain to our members, or we'll get maybe the tax threshold lifted, or government will have to give undertaking that they have to stop some 2 major flagship programs.
Right.
Albeit we have people who are very poor in this country, they cannot afford to pay school fees. So let's do targeting and get some people to enable school fees to be paid for them. The rest of the people, like the Minister of Finance one time said, he can afford to pay school fee for his children. let people like your good self and my friend John and Sampah can afford to pay school fees. And then I've taken myself out because I am not going to have a child now. So I think it's important for us to bear in mind that. And then Agenda 111 is a good thing, but it's not, we have sufficient things in the country for now. Let's rather pump money into those areas to be able to service, those areas and take care of our people.
So for now, we should put Agenda 111 on ice. We should hold on and focus on other things.
Yeah, and target the free SHS. And when I was in school, my parents used to, feed us. Saturdays and Sundays, parents feed their children. So let's think about all this and then reduce the numbers of some of the appointees. If there are too many, they should reduce some. Then organized labor will see that some action has been taken. They will suspend their demands or do otherwise, give something, other than the action they want to take. So let's be very, very, very active in this conversation and not limit it to we can't give anything.
Okay.
And we'll take this to create a problem for all of us.
All right. So giving you the final bite, Dr. Akakpo, some of the things we've heard, halt or put a freeze on Agenda 111. For those who can pay for free SHS, let them pay. Scrap the National Cathedral for now. It's not relevant. I mean, all these ideas have been shared by Mr. Sampah and Austin Gami. What are your proposals moving into tomorrow's deliberations? What are you hoping to see in about a minute? Hello, Dr. Akakpo.
One of the things that Mr. Sampah talked about is the issue of trust and the history of negotiations with government, where the team they bring in sometimes doesn't signal seriousness or we take your concerns very seriously. Even sometimes they may agree on something and then a day or two later they renege or they don't even fulfill that promise. So both sides are going in with a history that suggests to one side that there are trust issues there, confidence is not also that very high. But government is also going in on the back of very difficult economic times. I'm hoping that, as Mr. Sampah said, let government bring in a very strong team that signals to labor that we take your concerns very seriously. We really want to negotiate in good faith. Because at the end of the day, whatever the leaders of the union also agree on, they have to turn around and sell it to their members. And that's not that's not an easy task for them to do. So again, I am hoping that negotiations will be done in an environment of trust, in an environment of transparency, and whatever both sides commit to, especially government, that they would not renege on that. Because just listening to Mr. Sampah and the sheer numbers and the number of public sector institutions, I don't think we want to see a situation where our public sector grinds to a halt because of the key things that they do on a daily basis to keep the economy moving, to keep society running.
Right. It's been really interesting engaging all of you gentlemen, and we're immensely grateful that you took the time to join us. Dr. Osai Kwapong is a CDD fellow. We also had Austin Gami, a labor expert, and Mr. John Sampah, Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union. Gentlemen, thank you and do have a good day. To you in the studio, Mr. Sampah, we can only wish you the very best. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just hold for me. And when we return on the show, we'll take a bit of a breather. When we return, it's all about you. You've heard the conversations from these schools struggling to survive as far as free SHS is concerned. The buffer stock company, underweight provisions given them. We heard from the likes of Dr. Clement Apaku, who's talking about long-standing issues. Very interesting conversation. Our question to you is, what does this mean for the survival of free SHS? And some people have even spoken about it on the back of the labor agitations that, look, we ought to really prioritize. Do get interactive with your messages. We'll read them. And you can call this line right after the break. 0302-211-691, extension 2. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Time for you to have your say right here on the show. Let's not waste any time, shall we? But welcome, Bernice. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. That was an interesting conversation you had.
Oh, yours was as well.
Tackle the issue from all the angles. So remember, during my conversation with Mr. Kwarting, PRO of the Education Ministry, I mentioned about some schools having to sell bread. Well, I've received more information on why the bread was sold. It's interesting. So I'm told that the Accra Girls was hosting a national cadet program, and the school was told that it will be receiving 600 students. So it prepared for 600 students, but only 300 of them showed up. So there was a backlog. So what happens to the extra bread? And
so there's a backlog of 300.
Yes, and so they had to sell the bread to the students so it doesn't go waste. In any case, due to the issues we discussed, the students were taking porridge without bread anyway. And so that's how come bread was sold to the students. Okay. But the thing is, I'm not sure this explanation was given to the students. So they thought it was going to continue. I mean, so based on my source, it was like, oh, now we buy bread. And so it was the hope that it will continue. Sorry to disappoint the students. This is not going to continue, but that's why you had to buy the bread. So if you didn't have the explanation, I'm giving it to you. But we have our first caller. Hello, Foster.
Hello.
Hello, let's hear you, sir.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please, my concern I want to raise here is not biased anyway, but it's actually eating up into our lives, especially with the teachers. The cost of living allowance. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are in the village or you are in the city. Everything is so expensive. And how can we survive? How can we make life out of this? But, for them to convince us, the government to convince us that what is happening now is a hardship that all of us must, bear with, is what? One thing they must do is that they must also cut down their costs.
Okay.
The way they go about enjoying some of the state privileges, it must come down. They must pay their own fuel. They must pay for their own fuel. And other things. Then we know that all of us, we are going through hardship. And now whatever they will say, we can accept it. Currently, they said they are issuing license. And if you are in-service teacher, you shall be issued a license. But those of us who had education after 2019 and still in the system, they were denied. And we don't know the way forward. So everybody is confused. In fact, so they actually have to come down and then talk to us and make things right.
Right, Foster, thank you very much. Sorry, your point is well noted. We'll have to pick other callers. Isa from Tamale, good morning. Let's hear you.
Good morning.
Yes, please make your points real snappy so we can take other callers.
Yeah, I have some two recommendations for the country. First of all, I believe that slashing down the salary of 71 office holders, state-owned enterprises, we don't need entities as the state-owned enterprises. These are wastes on the public sector. Ministers. We have regional ministers without deputies. Can't we do the same for our ministers? For instance, a great minister, that's it. One person can handle the ministry. So let's do away with these things. These problems are created by Akakpo, and he has created them, and he ought to fix it.
Right. Thank you very much for calling. Yes, Isa, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us here on the AM show. Hello, Ghana. Happy moment is here. Let's storm World Cup Qatar 2022 with Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water from Casapreco Company Limited. Simply buy your favorite Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water and text a 4-digit unique number on the neck of the bottle to short code *780# option 2. *780# option 2. And follow the prompts on all networks for free. Be one of the lucky winners to this year's World Cup in the monthly draw. You can also win TVs, fridges, microwave ovens, mobile phones, home theaters, free drinks, and more instantly. Please don't waste any time. Grab a bottle of Storm Energy Drink, Puma Soft Drinks, and Awake Drinking Water, and let's storm Carter this World Cup. This promotion is on the NLA Caritas platform, and this advert is FDA approved. Terms and conditions apply. And also, so you know, a person who is not required to register for VAT may voluntarily apply to be registered. A voluntary applicant shall be registered as a taxable person where the Commissioner General is satisfied that the person has a fixed place of abode or business, or reasonably believes the person keeps proper accounting records related to any business activity carried on by that person, submits regular and reliable tax returns, or reasonably believes that the person is fit and proper to be registered. Let's make a few more calls as we wrap up this edition of the AM show. Francis from Kumasi. Hello, Francis. Let's hear you quickly, please.
Hello, Francis.
As labor teacher, that sometimes when we go for government negotiation, they try to negotiate. I think last year it was 4% and 7%. What we know is government raised its appointees. Yes. Good morning.
Do we have anyone on apart from Francis? If there's someone else, let's listen to Francis for now. Francis, go ahead.
I wanted to add a point to what the discussion this morning. You know, we are on strike because government is trying to deceive us. One government said you want to give us 4% and 7% as an increment, but lo and behold, government started raise the appointees for positions to 50-something and 30-something percent. So our salary still is being consumed by even the inflation, and there is no much to survive on it. That's why we are still on the strike.
All right, Francis.
The government should do something about it.
Sure. Thank you very much for calling in, Benjamin, and that will be our last and final call on the show this morning. Well, I was having a conversation with one of our colleagues who said he believes that we'll have to brace ourselves for tougher times. Well, we've been told that
the writing is on the wall. Even before we started hinting towards going to the IMF, I had been interacting with economists both on the show and off the show, people who know the economic and the financial space, and they were already warning that we had to put certain measures in place because where we're inching towards, it would mean that 2023 and 2024 could be tougher years. Now that we're heading for an IMF program, and with all the problems we have, we really need to pray for Ghana and also work to support the system, because
definitely
these are not
reminds me of
ordinary times.
Of the sermon I heard on Sunday, which was just yesterday. It was pray and build. Okay, and it was focused on the book of Nehemiah, where you realize that the Israelites
rebuilding
were
efforts,
both praying and building. So there needs to be a balance of the two. And that was a sermon I heard.
Where's Samuel Kojo brace? Let's brace ourselves for...
Well, on that note, we end this edition of the AM show. It's been a pleasure coming your way. And we'll just have to say Barka de Salah to those of you who are celebrating Eid al-Adha. Barka Kade. And it's been a good one here for us. And we hope it has been for you this morning. Thank you for joining us. Coming up next, Aisha Ibrahim brings you News Desk. Do stay with us here on the Joy News channel. But for now, from Benjamin and myself, it's enjoy the rest of your day and take care.